Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into one of the biggest questions out there. Is the universe just a cosmic accident, a random series of events, or is it a deliberate message, a book of signs waiting to be read? This is really the heart of the tension between a purely scientific worldview and a faith-based one, and we're going to break down both sides. So, let's just put the big question right on the table. Has science made God unnecessary? As our understanding of physics, biology, and chemistry grows, have we simply explained God away? Is the whole idea of a creator now, just redundant? To really get a handle on this, first we have to understand the powerful worldview of naturalism. This is basically the idea that we can explain our entire reality, everything from the Big Bang to our own consciousness, using only the laws and processes of nature, no supernatural help needed. So, philosophical naturalism makes a pretty bold claim. It says the physical universe is all there is. That's it. And if we can explain everything we observe through natural causes, then adding a supernatural being into the mix isn't just unnecessary. It's an extra, complicated layer that we just don't need. And this brings us to the main tool in the naturalist's toolkit, Occam's razor. You've probably heard of it. It's the principle of simplicity. It basically says that when you've got competing explanations for something, the one that makes the fewest new assumptions is probably the right one. Keep it simple. And the philosopher Graham Oppy takes this principle and applies it directly to the debate about God. His argument is pretty straightforward. If naturalism can explain the universe just as well as theism, but it does it without adding this huge, complex entity called God, well then naturalism is the simpler and therefore the better explanation. This leads to a really classic critique you might have heard of, the God of the gaps. The argument goes like this. For centuries, we used God as the answer for things we couldn't explain. What causes lightning? God. What causes disease? God. But as science starts filling in those gaps in our knowledge, the territory where God is needed seems to get smaller and smaller and smaller. Now, here's a really key point. Science doesn't actually have to disprove God to win the argument. All it has to do is remove the reason for believing in God in the first place. This is called an undercutting defeater. Think about it like this. The theory of evolution doesn't prove God doesn't exist, but it does provide a natural explanation for the complexity of life. So we no longer need a divine designer to explain it. The justification for that belief has been, undercut. And what's so powerful about this approach is that naturalism now has plausible alternatives for all the big questions that used to belong exclusively to religion. Where did the universe come from? Maybe it's just a brute fact that's always been there in some form. Why are the laws of physics so perfectly fine-tuned for life? Well, maybe we just live in one of a gazillion universes in a multiverse, and we just happen to win the cosmic lottery. And where does morality come from? Maybe it's just a product of evolutionary psychology that helped us survive in groups. Okay, so that's the case for naturalism. But now let's switch gears and look at the Quranic perspective. And what's fascinating here is that instead of rejecting science, this view actually embraces it. It suggests that the discoveries of science aren't a threat to faith at all, but a potential pathway to it. So the Quranic Response kind of starts by turning the tables. It points out that just as there's a God of the gaps, you could argue there's also a naturalism of the gaps. That's the belief that whatever science can't explain right now, it will definitely be able to explain in the future. And the argument goes, isn't that its own kind of faith? A faith in the future power of science? Instead of seeing nature as this blind, random system, the Quran presents the universe as a book of ayat, which means signs. The whole idea is that the incredible order, the beauty, the intricate workings of the cosmos, they aren't just random facts to be collected. They're signs that point toward a source, and they're inviting us to think deeply, to contemplate. And this verse from the Quran just captures that idea perfectly. It suggests that when people of understanding really study the universe, their conclusion isn't, wow, this is all just random and meaningless. Instead, observing this incredible order leads them to a conclusion of purpose. And the Quran is just packed with examples of these signs, repeatedly pointing to observable natural things. We're not talking about looking for miracles in the gaps of science here. It's about looking at the very fabric of reality itself. The rain, the wind, the stars, the cycle of night and day, and seeing that as the primary evidence. And this all leads to the absolute core concept of Tawhid, which means the oneness of God. Now, in this view, the laws of nature aren't some separate force from God. They are the consistent, moment-by-moment expression of God's will. That very consistency and predictability that science relies on to even work, that's seen as the ultimate sign of a single unifying intelligence behind it all. And this is the huge shift in perspective. It's not a God of the gaps, it's a God of the whole system. So this brings us to a really critical takeaway. The Quranic view completely rejects that old idea of a watchmaker God, the one who built the universe, wound it up, and then just left it to run on its own. Instead, it proposes a God who is continuously and actively involved with creation. And we see this activity in three key ways. First, God is Al-Qayyum, the sustainer, the one who is actively upholding the laws of physics in every single moment. Second, God is the guide, actively intervening by sending revelation to provide a moral and ethical compass for us. And third, God is Ujibu, the responder, who has built reality itself to be responsive to our intentions, our sincerity, and our efforts. So you see, from this point of view, science and faith are not at war. They aren't even really competitors. They're just two different tools for asking two different kinds of questions. Science is brilliant at telling us how the universe works, but revelation, or faith, is for asking why it works that way in the first place and what it all means. And the final piece of the puzzle here is a concept called fitra. This is the idea that human beings are actually born with an innate programming, a kind of natural disposition to recognize these signs in the world around us. So from this perspective, our reason and our intellect aren't obstacles to faith. They're the very tools that are designed to lead us to it. So we're left with this profound choice. Both worldviews are looking at the exact same universe, the same laws of physics, the same biological complexity, but they come to two fundamentally different interpretations. One sees a self-contained, unguided, random system. The other sees a purposeful text filled with signs pointing to an author. The data is the same for everyone. The conclusion we draw from it, well, that changes everything.